Today, we're diving into just 3 verses from the book of Isaiah. But let me tell you, these verses pack an unbelievable punch. They contain one of the most powerful and, honestly, most misunderstood stories in all of Scripture. It's a prophecy that builds to a really shocking reveal. So, let's get into it and break down the prophecy of the suffering servant. He was wounded for our transgressions. With his stripes, we are healed. These words tell such a dramatic story. It's all about mistaken identity, this profound turnabout, and ultimately, an incredible sacrifice. It's kind of like a mystery that unfolds in 3 parts, and we are going to break it down verse by verse to really uncover the truth at the heart of this passage. So, our journey starts with verse 4, and right away it hits us with a paradox. It creates this intense conflict between why the servant was really suffering and how the people watching him, well, they just completely misunderstood the whole reason for his pain. Just look at the contrast here. It's pretty stark. On one hand, you have the reality. He was taking on our pain, our griefs and sorrows. But on the other hand, the perception was totally different. People actually believed he was being punished by God for his own sins. This is the central misunderstanding that the rest of the passage is about to dramatically unravel. So, what does it really mean that he hath borne our griefs? Well, one commentary suggests his miracles of healing are the perfect example. See, it wasn't just a simple wave of a hand. He literally felt the weight of the affliction he was taking away, all through this deep, unparalleled sympathy. To heal their pain, he had to first feel that burden on his own shoulders. And what about that idea that he was smitten of God? This quote here explains the crowd's logic perfectly. They saw his suffering, and they just concluded he must have done something awful to deserve it, that God had abandoned him because of his own failures. They couldn't have been more wrong. And that phrase, carried our sorrows, well, it finds its ultimate fulfillment right here, in the Garden of Gethsemane. These aren't just poetic words. Here, we see the immense, just soul-crushing personal cost of that act. The sorrow was so heavy, it was even unto death, showing us the true weight of what he was carrying for everyone else. All right, let's move on to verse 5 and see how this all builds. This verse is the dramatic reveal. It's like the moment the camera turns and shows us what's really going on. It directly corrects that misunderstanding from verse 4 and explains the true story. And it all hinges on this one tiny word, but. This is the pivot point for the entire passage. Everything we thought we knew from that last verse is about to get turned completely on its head. This word signals a total reversal from he was suffering for his sins to the shocking truth he was suffering for ours. So then this verse gives us a 4-part explanation for his suffering, making the case for what's called vicarious suffering, suffering on behalf of someone else. And it's not just a random list. Each part builds on the last. He was wounded for our rebellions, bruised for our moral failings. He was punished, chastised to bring us peace. And his physical wounds, his stripes, are the very source of our healing. You see the pattern? The cause is always our actions. The effect is always his suffering. Now let's look a little closer at that word bruised. It doesn't just mean a surface-level injury. That word actually echoes all the way back to the very first prophecy in Genesis. It points to a deep, crushing weight of sorrow, the spiritual battle he endured for everyone else. And what about the chastisement of our peace? Well, believe it or not, the high priest Caiaphas gives us a kind of unwitting prophecy here. He argued that it was necessary for one man to die to save the nation from the Romans. Now, he was just talking about political peace, but he had no idea he was actually describing a spiritual reality. One man's punishment secured the peace of all. Finally, let's look at that word stripes. The original Hebrew is so specific. It refers to the actual physical marks left by blows, the welts from a scourging. So the prophecy is making this direct, visceral link. His physical suffering is the very source of our spiritual healing. And all of that brings us to verse 6. After explaining the what and the why of the servant's suffering, this final verse makes the problem universal and delivers this absolutely stunning theological conclusion. And this is the great equalizer, isn't it? The verse doesn't point fingers at any one group. It just says, all we. It uses this metaphor of sheep. Animals that aren't necessarily malicious, but are just lost, each one wandering off on their own path. It's a universal diagnosis of the human condition. And here it is.
This is the theological climax of the whole passage. After establishing that we have all gone astray, Isaiah reveals the solution. The collective guilt, the iniquity of us all, was gathered up and placed entirely upon him. The whole mechanism of atonement, the process of making things right, is just laid bare.
I mean, how do you even begin to grasp what it means to have the iniquity of us all laid on one person? This cross-reference offers a staggering first-person perspective. It describes a suffering so immense that it caused even God to tremble, to bleed, and to suffer in both body and spirit. This is the weight he carried. So, we've journeyed from seeing suffering as a punishment from God to understanding it as a substitution, one person taking on the burden for everyone else. The question this leaves us with is profound. How does that single shift in thinking, from punishment to substitution, change the very meaning of suffering itself?